This is welcome. This is week 5 of the history of photography, and we're going to spend the next two sessions talking about art in photography, 19th and 20th century art. But I want you to have some tools, if you will, on how art works and how to make your image tell a story. We're also going to talk about narrative in photography. To start this, I want to do a quick demonstration of mind reading. That's right, you heard me right. Um, I want you to think a number from 1 to 10. Don't tell me what it is. Kidding. This is obviously pre-recorded. Hold that number in your thought in your head for a minute, and I want you to multiply that number by 9. You probably have a two-digit number now. I want you to hold that number. Take those two digits and combine them to make a new number. Hold that number in your head for a second. I'd like you to subtract 5. And now I want you to align the alphabet with the number system. 1 equals A, 2 equals B, 3 equals C, 4 equals D. You get the picture. Think of a country that begins with your letter. Think of the second letter in the name of that country. Think of an animal that begins with that letter. Think of the color of that animal. Denmark with the gray elephant. Probably some of you will have ended up there. And you're going, how did he do that? This is all pre-recorded and everything. Well, you know something? I didn't read your minds. You went down a narrow mathematical path and didn't have a lot of choice except to end up in Denmark with the gray elephant. That's what good composition is. Composition is a language that all the time is used every single day that talks to you so that you believe what you see and you fall into certain paths thinking that it's your own conclusion, but in fact, you are looking at something which was preconceived. Now, at the end of today, at the end of this session, you will have a lot of tools whereby you'll recognize compositions going on and you're being told what to think. And you'll be able to navigate these a whole lot better. So looking at your list, we'll start with aerial perspective. Perspective is, as you probably think, 1 or 2 point perspective with a horizon line and little dots out there, and the building, has is shown to be going off into the distance. Aerial perspective is something which you all experience here in Southern California. You think it's at the end of the day, you're driving somewhere across the desert and the mountains are kind of lavender or blue. That's because there's dirt in the air, removing some of the light, scattering primarily the red light. And that's why you've never stood on a mountain and looked at your feet and said, wow, that dirt's blue and lavender. It just doesn't work that way. So that is aerial perspective. The use of basically, forgive me, dirty air to create a sense of distance. Denotation and connotation. I want to read something to you. This is entitled The Things the Movies Teach Us. At least one pair of identical twins is born evil. Honest, hardworking policemen are traditionally gunned down 3 days before their retirement. All beds have a special L-shaped cover sheet that reach the armpit level of a woman, but only the waist level of a man beside her. All grocery bags have at least one stick of French bread. Um, if you're blonde, gorgeous, it is possible to become an expert in the world in nuclear fission at the age of 22. Should you decide to defuse a bomb, don't worry which wire you cut, you always pick the right one. These are the things in the movies that we accept without thinking about it. Denotation is exactly what do you see? Think of the police, just the facts, ma'am. What exactly did you see? Without imbuing it with your judgments. If you saw a road with a line of palm trees and a convertible Rolls Royce going down it, the denotation is road, line of palm trees, convertible Rolls Royce. The connotation would probably be Hollywood. It wouldn't be Wisconsin or Minnesota, but you look at that and you're already reading into it where it is. So connotation is what your judgment for it, but the denotation is a straight, um, without judgment analysis of exactly what you see. Chiaroscuro is the play of light and dark, the drama of a deep shadow. Right now, the light's pretty flat on my face. I have I have a shadow over here, but it's not really dramatic or really highlighted here and dark up here. That would be chiaroscuro. And it's a way of giving your image a lot of drama. Arabesque is a line that connects things. It doesn't have to be a complete line, but it is a line that connects things or can be read to connect things. Tangent is when two things meet and touch. Imagine if you saw a photograph of me and my nose is at the edge of the photograph. When things touch, it creates a tension that you cannot ignore. So when you want things to touch, make sure it's deliberate because people are going to notice it and feel it. For example, when you crop a photograph, you would not crop it right through a person's eyes or at the neck or right across the wrist. People feel the pain. You may crop my face in like this, but not right through the eyeballs. Design. Now I'm going to do a little share screen here, and I'm going to use that whiteboard for design. And I'm going to use a little line here, and we're going to go to, first of all, there is the dot. You notice your line, there's a dot, and I'm going to make this format black. And I'm going to make a little tiny dot right here. And over here, I'm going to make now looking at this white screen, don't look at that black dot. Let me make it a little more round if I can. Don't look at that dot. The dot draws the eye. The dot holds the eye. If I make a second dot about the same size, or roughly, I'm doing this with my mouse. What happens is your eye runs back and forth and back and forth and back and forth between the two. You may have noticed in life that you're talking to somebody and their eyes go back and forth and back and forth between your eyes. It's similar in principle. What happens is when you have two dots, you are drawing a comparison between two things. Now, if I hit the eraser here, I can eliminate this and I can eliminate that. Now, let's go back to draw. Now we're going to make some lines here. I think next one on the list was line. We're going to make a line. No, it's not working, is it? That line should be straight, but it's not. What does a flat line roughly mean? I wish that were really flat. Hold on, I have an idea. Maybe I can make this right up against my keyboard. No, boy, that didn't work, did it? So erase that and try again. Well, it's a slope. I didn't mean for that. But it's a straight line. What does a straight line read to you? It reads maybe calm. It's really undecisive. Let's make another line. This line's kind of a sweeping line. I can't draw clearly. Or certainly can't make my mouse. Now, if that were a smoother curve, it would also read of calm or little waves. What about this line? That line says fast. In Western civilization, we read from left to right and from top to bottom. So you approach this line in this way and you read a slope that you're going down. Now this is very culturally driven. In our culture, we read from left to right and from top to bottom. In some Asian cultures, they read straight down and from right to left. I know that I was at an event for another culture where we were reading from, I think it was the Talmud, and I noticed that the pages I couldn't read because it was all in Hebrew, but I noticed that the pages were written right to left. Now this says fast. What about this line? Oh, sorry about that. I can do better than that. What about this line? I'll do a better job. That line. That line is a slope going up and it says work. It says you're going up, you're laboring up. Now I'm going to eliminate all of these. I want to do something else. So what about this line? Vertical lines say, pay attention, show respect. If you put a dot at the bottom, it becomes an exclamation point. What about this line, these lines? Also write parallel lines. And what if I did something like this? Columns. Now, the day has come and gone when we needed columns to hold a building, hold a building's roof up. In the 1930s, there was a lot of development. It was called the Bauhaus, and they could make buildings with the structure running through the center of the building. And you saw a lot of buildings that were all glass on the perimeter. Think of the Johnson Glass House, for example. So we don't need columns anymore, but still, when you see a building with columns, it means wealth, it means important. It could mean the Supreme Court or the White House or the Capitol building. It's not Ralph's, it's not a Mobil station. So that's how. Now I'm going to erase this. And I'm going to make another line. This line is going to go like this. And at this point, you should ask yourself, after the lines I've shown, how does this line make you feel? It's not a complex thing, but it may be unnerving, a little bit crazy, you know, like a schizophrenic kind of crazy. So this is an alarming line, and all these lines do these sorts of things. Now, I want to look back at my notes list. Pattern, texture, balance, rule of thirds. I'm going to save this whiteboard for the rest. A shape, let's go back to stop share. A shape, let's go for a second. What shape is this? Sorry about that, a square, of course. And what shape is this? Triangle. What shape is this? Black dot. And what shape is this? Probably hard to see. This is actually a hexagon that's white. So if I hold it against black, it's easier for you to see. But against white, it's very difficult for you to see. So this shape becomes a rectangle, white. What happens is your eye runs off the edge of this. The eye is looking for the edge, looks at a field that is uniform in hue, chrome, and saturation. And your eye ran off the edge, ran clockwise around, clockwise to me anyway, and assessed it as a rectangle. That's what camouflage is. You know, you look at a bunch of foliage. Do you see the Humvee? Do you see the soldiers? Do you see the rocket launcher? And then one steps out of the green foliage and he's up against a brown hill, and suddenly you see him. And probably the first thing you're looking for is the shape of the helmet. It tells you friend or foe. So this is a black circle, and this is a black rectangle for hue, chrome, and saturation, so you can tell the shape. That would be the explanation of shape. Patterns are a repeating system, could be rows, could be dots. Patterns have a way of saying a lot. They say a lot as in numerically a lot. We have a whole lot of something. If your pattern runs off the edge of the frame, it says we have a whole lot of that. I would normally give this presentation in front of a classroom and say, you know, if my picture were to crop in tight and saw only a bunch of students, it's a way of saying there's a whole bunch of students here. But when the camera backs out and sees the edge of this batch of students, you say, well, that's how many there are. And it looks like a smaller number. Texture is another form of pattern. I'm wearing a seersucker shirt here with a bunch of lines on it. Texture could be a way of feeling your image. Is it rough? Is it wood? Is it sand? Is it sandpaper? Balance in a frame. I'm going to go back to share screen for a second here. And I'm going to go to the whiteboard again. And let's say this is our whole composition. Now let's make a little black line here. Let's put it in one corner. Let's make a little black dot. Oh, I did something wrong. What am I doing here? Draw. I want to draw and I want to use that. I don't mean for it to do that. Erase. I want to draw. There, that's better. In the whole of this white image, is this image balanced? No, it's really off-centered. It's weighted heavily over here. Now, if I put another black dot over here, is it balanced? It has the beginnings of balance, but don't confuse symmetry with balance. This is really not the case. So I can eliminate that one because it's not very well done. What if I also, in the course of this little black dot, make it bigger, but over here, make another circle, and we're just going to draw lines on this. So it's not as heavy or as dense, but it's certainly there. Now we're having the beginnings of balance. This is all dense on one side. This is looser and fluffier on the other. Now, the rule of thirds. Here's the rule of thirds. I'm going to make 3 pictures here. Well, that's not very good. I'm going to destroy the last one. This is horrible. Horrible is the word. Our first picture, we're going to have the horizon line run right through the center. And it's kind of boring. It's too safe. The next one, we're going to put the horizon line very low in the picture. We have all of the sky. The next one, we're going to put the horizon line high in the picture. And we have very little sky on all this land. These two are immediately more interesting. They're not so symmetrical and safe. So now I want to erase all of these and draw something else. How does the rule of thirds work? We're going to make a big rectangle, and then we're going to make another line, and we're going to change the color format. Let's make it, I don't know, yellow. So we'll put a line here. We're going to divide it into thirds. And then I'll do one more line. This one's going to be, say, red. We have a red spot here, we have a red spot here, we have a red spot here, and we have a red spot here. Your eye moves through a picture more or less this way. Whatever we put here is perceived as important, and as you progress around, whatever's down here is perceived as unimportant. It's creating a gradation. Placement, these points of intersection are rather important in how images or how elements in your picture are perceived. So I'm going to stop that screen share for a minute, and I want to show you. I'm going to start with this one. Okay, composition. So let's look at this image for a minute. Look at all those dots where they're just black hinges, but they steal your eye. You probably hardly even notice that there's a little, oh, I'm afraid my little cursor's not showing up. There's a little sink right in the center. That's sort of lost on you. Here's obviously a skier, and his skis are pointed down, obviously, but there's a sense of speed in that angle. There's also a lot of contrast here, so you can see what he's all about. Remember, this may be culturally driven. You know, people in the Amazon don't actually see snow or actually appreciate what this is even going on here. This is the work of Imogene Cunningham. We'll get to her when we get to the straight photographers. A very gifted woman photographer from the 20th century. This is just leaves, but this actually has a couple of things going for it. Pattern and chiaroscuro, the play of light and dark. That makes it, just for photographs of leaves, it's pretty beautiful. Um, Now we have we have all these women and they're running off the edge on both sides. How many are there? Who cares? It's a way of saying a lot. This is the work of Gordon Parks. He was part of the FSA. We'll get to that in a few weeks. But it says a lot of people. How many people are here right now? What do you think? Well, it seems like a whole bunch of people, but the truth is there's probably more people in this class than there are people in this shot. But the fact that they're all packed in there and cut off at all edges of the frame implies that there's lots and lots and lots of people. Does this man have room? I wouldn't say so. Do you think, is that good or bad? He's packed toe to toe on both sides. His chair is packed on one side, his toes are on the other. This is the work of Irving Penn. We'll get to him in a few weeks as well, too. So this man doesn't have space. Is that good or bad? That's up to you. I'm not going to pass judgment, but I would say he's probably confined here. Does this man have space? And before you answer that, listen to this. This is obviously a painting, and this is a class in history of photography. But I want you to think about paintings. Painters have the same challenges that photographers do of dealing with a two-dimensional surface and giving it a story and giving it a narrative, giving it shape and form and depth. This man has a lot of space. It appears that he's a prospector at the top of a mountain in the west with a view in all directions. Do these guys have space? Now, this is a storytelling kind of space. It doesn't appear they do. I see blue sky, and their horses have, I think I counted was 19 arrows in. All the horses are dead. They're surrounded. Their future's not good, or their prospects are not great. Now, interestingly enough, this picture is 2/3 sky and only about 1/3 ground, but the whole story is on the ground. Why so much sky when all the story is on the ground? Because all that sky suggests there's no place to hide. There's no foliage, there's no forest, there's no trees, there's no place to escape. They're in the plains of the West or of the Midwest, and there's like no hope for them. Now, framing or cropping. This is a very tight shot of two people dancing, but you have to ask yourself, how much am I not seeing in this picture? You're not seeing this. And a lot of stories being told all the way around. From here, cut out all the stuff, to how much we've eliminated into this frame. Now let's look at this painting for a second. Now in the middle, there's a little woman in a white dress with blonde hair. She's Thumbelina. And your eyes go to her because she's on the brightest color in there on a red flower. There's a line leading up. Lines lead the eye. Remember this. Lines lead the eye. And the line of that stem leads up to her, and all the little flower petals are pointing in her direction. Add to that the attention of the nun looking right at her. Had Thumbelina been overlapping the white of the nun's habit, you might not even see her. There's no contrast that way. Add to that the red flower is framed in a cyan window framing, which that color contrast makes that red seem even redder. Now let's look at this picture for a second, another painting. It took you like what, a half a second, if that, to see that milk is being poured, and yet that's like one of the smallest things in the whole picture. We have some white flowers off on the left that confirm the whiteness of the milk, but the milk is happening in a dark frame, so the contrast of that makes it seem even brighter. Now this is an arabesque. This huge leaf in the front leads you down a path to the higher contrast of the leaf in the background. Your eye is being led. Now this is also a study in high contrast, a deep dark background, white flowers, beautiful flowers. Look at this. This woman's hair is practically a flame. This is a woman standing in France in a farm. Why is this interesting? Her hair. This is the work of Irving Penn. Very, very high contrast. Look at these little black dots of the netting over the woman's face. Her hat and her scarf all have sharp ends, which also draw your attention. Now, looking at this, what is the closest thing in this picture? It would be the plants in the foreground. What's the farthest thing? To the right, I see a house in the background, and to the left, I see some distant trees. Are they really distant? They have what we call aerial perspective. They're very soft. They have lower contrast, so they look like they're farther away. But if you ran your hand across the screen right now, or saw that picture, don't touch it, by the way. If you saw the picture, you would feel no distance. This is the work of Maynard Dixon. Maynard Dixon was the husband of Dorothea Lange. We'll mention her in a few weeks. And he was a Western painter, a very gifted Western painter. He had a strong sense of color. Blues retreat, so that makes those, there's your aerial perspective, that those mesas in the background are very distant, all blue, and that the red comes very forward. Here's a very interesting image. The mesa's red, it's got strong sun on it, but the foreground's blue. So the foreground, as distance, is fighting the background for distance. And then these huge clouds in the background, which run from a cool blue to warmer in the background. So there's a kind of a contest of distance there. Which direction does this painting have? Obviously to the right. The herrings are looking to the right. One took off to the right. The coastline, if you can call it that, of the lily pads and the reeds are all sweeping to the right. Even the black legs of the herring that's airborne confirm a line pointing to the right. So there's a direction of this painting. Now, what's going on here? Two guys playing cards. The sword leads up to where things are happening. The leg of the table is pointing, is the line that's leading up. Even the wine glass and the legs of the chair are pointing up and taking you to a place, to the brightest light in this picture, which attracts and holds your eye. This is the work of Norman Rockwell. People like to sort of scoff at Norman Rockwell as, kind of safe Americana kind of stuff, but he understood composition. Here we have a soldier returning home. We can presume it's his family. They all have red hair. Look at the tree and the deck his mother's standing on, and the water drain pipe all leading down to him. There's a number of lines. There's a line on the lower right which leads you up to him. And above his apparent mother is a star in the window. This indicates we have a family member off at the war. And then off to the left, we might presume that that is his high school sweetheart who's like waiting for him to come back as well. Quite a story. Now, pay attention to backgrounds. This is a photograph of a billboard with a palm tree behind it. Looks like the palm tree is coming out of the guy's head. This is a photograph of Steven Soderbergh, the director, reading an article about himself that he has just been nominated for 2 Oscars. Interestingly enough, the mural on the background is looking over his shoulder and enjoying the fact that he's got 2 Oscar nominations as well. Here is another Rockwell. And this is the young soldier who's returned from battle in the Pacific. He's got a trophy of his wartime glories, if you can say that, on a Japanese flag. And there's an orbit of people around him listening to him. Then in the far right, onto the top, we see a picture of him from the battle. Also, again, that little pattern which with a blue star indicating a family member is off at war. What is the location of this? We might say it's a machine shop. I see a gasket. I see a big hook for an engine hoist. Elements here that tell us where this is actually taking place. This is the work of Sir Lawrence Alma Tadema, a pre-Raphaelite painter, late 19th century. We see a series of concentric marble circles that lead us down to the people on the lower right. For me, the most interesting part of this is the woman sitting at the very top, and her head, the same color as the flowers behind her, overlap. The flowers in her dress blends in with the marble. Why is she vanishing into the background? What was the intent of that? This is entitled A Misunderstanding. This woman has turned her back on the guy. He said something wrong. And above her is some wisteria, and she's neatly framed in marble. So she's the center of attention. This is the work of Irving Penn. Here we have a good example of chiaroscuro, the play of light and dark, very dramatic lighting on the sky. Now, what does he do for a living? He trims trees, and yet this is a very powerful and impressive photograph. He's not a war hero, but he trims trees. Let's look at the rule of thirds here. This guy's head is in the upper left of the rule of thirds. And I don't actually know who he is, although I've read it a couple of times, but even when I saw his name, I still didn't mean anything to me. But he is an important person by his placement and by the framing of this photograph. Now, this guy is something else. Look how he's holding his cigarette, a perfect little triangle of fingers, a perfect little ash. He's got a monocle. His eye is in the upper quadrant of the rule of thirds. He's got chiaroscuro, the play of light and dark, a rather dramatic lighting on him. He looks like he's a force to be reckoned with. And this guy has a lot of attitude. In case you don't recognize it, that thing he's next to his face is a microphone, say from the 1920s to 1930s. He's also got the rule of thirds working for him. Feel all the tension going on. This is a Dorothea Lange photograph from the 1930s. You can see a lot of tension between them. You can't even really see his face, but you can feel like the jut of his jaw. She has crossed a picket line and he's on strike. That's why he resents her. She needs a job. Let's look at this photograph for a second. Her head is in the lower right quadrant of the rule of thirds. And nobody's an unimportant person, but she's kind of down on her luck, so to speak. I took the liberty of recropping this and putting her in the upper left. It doesn't quite have the same impact of this, where she's in the lower right. Now, this is obviously John Kennedy. I'm saying obviously, but I once showed this series at another school at Cal Poly, and I said, well, he's an important guy. And somebody in my class goes, who is he? I said, you're kidding. It's John Kennedy. This photograph was done by Arnold Newman. We'll talk about Arnold Newman when we get to 20th century portraiture in a couple of weeks. Now, why isn't he in the important spot? It's almost like we've put the Capitol in the important, actually the White House in the important spot. It's not the president, it's the presidency. Now, let's look at this. See the big white guy with his foot on the bumper? And it's Mississippi, 1936. He is obviously exuding all authority here, and everybody works for him. He's the boss. So don't think of these guidelines as rules that are etched in stone. They can go up or down or left or right. They are actually tools that you can make work for you as a photographer. And the photographers we will be looking at this semester, make them work for them. This is a photograph by Irving Penn. And there's an expression, and it goes like this. Take that which is familiar and make it unusual. Take that which is unusual and make it familiar. So this is a rather conventional portrait. I guess the man is sitting and the woman is standing next to him. You can almost see their faces through the linen hanging over them. And this could very well be the most important person in the village. Maybe he's, the witch doctor, the person who keeps evil spirits away. But it is a standard portrait. This is the work of Irving Penn. I have to give this my highest compliment. I wish I'd thought of that. Here we have converging lines, another sense of perspective that we can see, feel the real distance of this room and the activity of this room. There's one guy in the center sitting. He's the only one who's not a blur. Here we have sand dunes, and we have these lines that are all leading up. Your eye, remember, your eye follows the lines, and then there's this vertical line on the horizon. Now, this is the work of Dorothea Lange, and all these lines are leading to a building. The building is condemned, and it's going to be ripped down. This is during the period of the Dust Bowls. Now, this is the highest contrast. This is the rule of thirds here, but we have the highest contrast. This is all about the field and the grains, but we have the church, really high contrast and center placed. Look at all these converging lines here. You all go to the horizon and stop. Your eye didn't wander around the fields to the left or the right very long. You got onto the road and went right to the end. Now I'm going to talk about this for a couple of minutes, and I want to get one thing very clear. I hate the Nazis. I really hate the Nazis. Now, but look at all these. First of all, let's look at how many people are here. Thousands. It's important to note this is basically all the Nazis in Germany in 1933, although interest in the Nazi movement was spreading rapidly. We know that in the background we have three vertical lines. And what do the vertical lines say? Pay attention, show respect, you're in the presence of something important. We also know from experience and from history that those are red banners with a white field with a swastika in the center. So you really can't take your eyes off it as you listen to all that, that Nazi business. Now here's a building, and this buildings don't move, but there's a sense of action and movement here because of these lines that are sloping and coming down. The buildings don't actually move, and yet this is a very dramatic photograph of a building. Here, this is a very crazy photograph. This particular photographer did a self-portrait and didn't feel it was crazy enough, so he took a black pen and scrambled ink all over his face and his eyes and all around. He wanted this to look as crazy as he could, and he succeeded. Now, normally I would show this to the class and say, okay, I've been talking. You guys think about it. I'm going to get a drink of water, and you tell me what you think. But since this is all pre-recorded, I'll tell you what's going on here. This is a painting by Vincent van Gogh. It's one of his very last paintings. For a long time, it was thought to be his suicide note. The road in the center comes to a dead end. The road at the left comes to a dead end. So all roads were cut off to him. The road at the right is cut off. Are the birds coming at him or going away? It's called wheat fields. Are things bearing down on him? He died only a couple of weeks by a gunshot wound after this painting was done. But now increasingly it's believed that some local kids got their hands on a gun. They were messing around. The gun went off and shot Vincent van Gogh. He lingered for about 3 days. His brother Theo was able to visit him before he passed away. He insisted that no, this was his own doing. But it's also believed that now it's believed that he did not commit suicide. It was an accident, a stupid gun accident. Now let's look at one more of these. This next one's called Symbol and Meaning. And I hope you enjoy it. It's loading. Let's give it a second here. More than a second. Yep. What's going on? Go back and share. And okay. So, in the movie What Dreams May Come with Robin Williams, we see a red sailboat sailing across a body of water with beautiful mountains in the background. And this sailboat plows right into Robin Williams. As you can see, he's beige, she's boring, and his position, his posture is completely symmetrical. He meets the love of his life. She's beautiful, and she's going to give him a wonderful life. And my point in pointing that is the red flags that are the red sails, which are passionate, and she's got that purity of white about her. This is the movie A Dangerous Method, and it's about Carl Jung, psychiatrist, and his wife gives him a sailboat with red sails. Interestingly enough, that's where he has his affair with Keira Knightley. The green of new life, the white of purity, the red of passion. At the end of the movie, when she comes to his office to chew his head off, we see a painting on the wall which is sailboats with red flags. Passion is a double-edged sword. In the movie The Descendants with George Clooney, he says at the beginning, we're Hawaiian, but we don't know anything about Hawaii. We don't speak the language. We don't really know the culture. And the movie goes on to, the problems with his marriage, the infidelity in his marriage, and ultimately the death of his wife. The kids are out of control. The movie ends with this shot. They're all going to gather around and see what's on TV. Now, what I want you to notice is on the background behind the girl, there's a girl reclining his daughter. On the background is a Hawaiian woman reclining in a white dress like the daughter. They are symmetrical, but they're opposites. And I think what's being read here is that we've changed so much from our ancestors. What do all ancestors have? Descendants. What all the descendants have? An ancestor. They've changed so much from their ancestors, and they've changed not at all. They have the same problems. In the movie Submarine, we follow the life of Oliver Tate, and he wants three things in life: a girlfriend, to lose his virginity, and to help save his parents' slowly declining marriage. In this scene, his parents have come to his bedroom to talk to him. He's kind of trapped in his bed. Notice above his head is an illustration of a couple in bed who've turned their heads away from each other. This speaks in 100 ways of what's going on between the parents. Their marriage has gone cold. In the movie Pulp Fiction, Bruce Willis is a man without a conscience who's thrown a fight, and he's being chased by the black man on the right. They are captured by a sadist who's going to torture them to death, presumably. Bruce Willis is able to effect his escape, and at the door where he could easily just get away, something happens. Bruce Willis grows a conscience, and he knows he has to go back. His head is surrounded by a Confederate flag, and he has to do right by that black man. When a painter does a self-portrait in a mirror, the self-portrait they do is a mirror image. They don't reverse it. They're painting exactly what they see in the mirror. So their picture is always backwards. This is Norman Rockwell doing exactly the same thing, looking in a mirror, and the picture he's doing is not a reversed picture, but it is the mirror, the reversed mirror. Now, in the movie A Bridge of Spies, we see a man looking in a mirror, and as the camera pulls back, he's doing a self-portrait from a mirror. But his self-portrait is not reversed. His self-portrait is the way you and I would see him. This is a man with a secret. His secret is huge. He is a Soviet spy. This is the true story of a Soviet spy living in Brooklyn, New York in 1957. And every day he must present himself to the world in a manner which is the opposite of the truth he knows himself to be. In the movie Spitfire Grill, we meet a woman who's just been released from a women's correctional institution, and she has to report to a town and present herself to the sheriff of the town and explain that she's paroled and that he's going to be her de facto parole officer, and he has to help her find a place to stay and get a job. Notice the way they groomed her bangs over her eyes. Mentally, she's still behind bars. In the movie Deer Hunter, the movie opens early on with a Russian Orthodox wedding. At the reception, the newlyweds drink from a double goblet of wine, and if they can drink it without spilling any, their marriage will have good luck. The camera comes in tight on her immaculate white blouse, and as they drink, drops of red wine spill on it. Her husband goes off to Vietnam. When he comes back, he's lost 2 legs and an arm. He has lost as many limbs as there are drops of wine there. In Christian iconography, we have a symbol called the halo. It surrounds the head and it denotes people who are favored in the eyes of God. A halo can take many forms. It can be a mere glow, it can be a floating ring in the air, but it means people who are martyred or blessed in the eyes of God. I want you to hold that thought for a second. This is House of Cards. That is Francis Underwood, President of the United States. And if you've ever seen this show, you know he is a horrible, horrible person. If you don't hate Francis Underwood, you have never seen this show. The monogram on his cufflinks tells it all. And now I have to give you some background on this particular scene. Francis Underwood created a program for his presidency. The trademark program is called America Works, or AmWorks, and the plan is to have all Americans gainfully employed in 18 months. Suddenly, a hurricane of biblical proportions is aimed at the United States, and with that, thousands of lives and thousands of homes hang in the balance. He must it is important to note that to fund AmWorks, he took money from a lot of other programs, and in doing so made significant political enemies who would like to see his presidency absolutely fail. Now, back to the hurricane. The hurricane's coming at the United States, thousands of lives, thousands of homes hang in the balance. He must fully recapitalize FEMA in one night. And the only way to do that is to drain all the money out of AmWorks and destroy his program. By morning, the hurricane has done what hurricanes periodically do. It did a U-turn and went back out into sea. People don't appreciate the bullet they have dodged, but he is meeting his advisors to assess the extraordinary political damage to his administration. Behind him is the emblem of the US presidency. Under closer examination, we see that Francis Underwood has earned his halo. Is this the serendipity of one angle just once not to be replicated? Hardly. It's a recurring decimal throughout this scene. Even this opening scene, even this opening shot bears an uncanny resemblance, and I believe no accident, no coincidence, to Leonardo da Vinci's The Last Supper of Christ. Notice his placement, notice his arms, notice his body language. Now, we have traditions worldwide of raising a toast with wine. Usually wine, but not always, where you take your glasses and tap them together and raise a toast. It's done all the time, all over, millions of times, all over the world. On the other end of the spectrum, when people have a sword fight, and I mean even a serious sword fight, they start by crossing their swords and then they tear into each other. This isn't necessarily professional or competitional fencing. It's real sword fights. Now, in the television show, The Americans, on the right, we meet Philip, who is a Soviet spy living as a mole in 1980s Washington, D.C. He's a Soviet mole. And suddenly a new family moves in next door. And we meet as the guy on the left. And that guy is an FBI agent whose job it is to look for Soviet spies. And they are having a beer in the kitchen. Notice closely how they tap their beers. I apologize, it's awfully dark and the rendition is kind of difficult, but are they raising a toast or are they crossing their swords? It is amazing how much is said in that simple gesture of crossing their glasses when they raise a toast. There will be violence between them. We have an idea in Western civilization of a character known as the Angel of Death, the Grim Reaper, or just Death, a ghoulish character that comes to collect mortal souls and to deliver them to the other world, the underworld. Normally depicted without being able to see the face, sometimes on horseback, in rags. Now, in this scene in House of Cards, Francis Underwood's going to visit his father's grave. The Secret Service has swept the area and created a secure perimeter so he can have a private moment at his father's grave. Interestingly enough, at his father's gravesite, he begins to berate his father's memory for the sheer mediocrity of his father's life. And to punctuate that, Francis Underwood urinates on his father's gravestone and then walks away. Notice the pattern of urination on the gravestone. I took the liberty of outlining this in Photoshop. What would you say? Death has come to town, and somebody in this show is going to die. In The Graduate, which was a masterpiece of composition, Dustin Hoffman ends up having an affair. And here he is tucked neatly between the legs of Mrs. Robinson. She corners him, she undresses and corners him, and he's trapped. Notice everything in the room is pink, right down to the air conditioner on the wall. In this scene, the two men of her life, her husband and Dustin Hoffman, are in a neat little box, and she exudes complete confidence, control over the situation. For those of you who've seen the movie, it does not go well. In the movie Jaws, we see Rod Scheider is the sheriff, and Richard Dreyfuss is a marine biologist, and they have a shark problem in Martha's Vineyard. Notice all the shark's teeth. And they have to go out and find this shark, which is eating up people just all along the beach. Rod Scheider is going to go in this boat, and he is the sheriff. He's wearing a black slicker. His wife is going to come and see him off. She's got a black sweater and a black scarf. It's an ominous question. Tucked in between them, they have a big debate about whether or not he should go. And the boat is the thing between them, not only metaphorically, but literally, the boat is placed between them as they're debating whether or not he should go. He goes, and the boat goes out, and as it goes, it is viewed through shark's teeth, which come in closer and closer and closer. We know that this boat is never going to come back. This boat is doomed. In the movie Wind River, a number of women in their teens or 20s have died in an extremely mysterious and suspicious manner. In this scene, both of these men have lost a daughter. The man on the right is part of the reservation. The man on the left is a tracker. And between them is a solid white post. The man on the right, an American, indigenous American, is saying, "You don't understand my life. You don't understand what it means to live on the reservation. Our lives are so different." But as the camera changes position, the post is eliminated, and they talk about the loss of their daughters and how much they have in common. In the television series True Detective, we follow two detectives, Matthew McConaughey and Woody Harrelson. They are two detectives who despise each other. And in this scene, Woody Harrelson is in the lieutenant's office this is McConaughey in the sheriff's detective's office with Harrelson, and they're having it out. Now notice every time the camera goes from him to Harrelson to the detective, and every time it goes back to McConaughey, his head is shifting towards that post. It gets closer and closer, and finally there's a post coming right out of his head. In portraiture, which we're going to be talking about, which we just finished talking about, you would never have a post coming out of someone's head. In the 1970s, in 1960s and 1970s, there were a lot of anti-war demonstrations with regards to the war in Vietnam. These photographs were taken in 1970 at Kent State, Ohio, by a student for the student newspaper. And he grabbed this now iconic photograph of a woman pleading at the death of her friend, and there's a fence post coming right out of her head. Now, in photojournalism, a photograph is sacrosanct. You don't modify it, you don't retouch it, you don't do any of that. Now, this photograph was reprinted many times, and at some point, somebody noticed, hey, wasn't there a post sticking out of her head? Somebody airbrushed it out. And nobody ever fessed up to being the person that did it, because you're not supposed to touch these. Given that, let's go back to Woody Harrelson here with the post coming out of his head. Here we are, you've got a television show with full artistic control. Why would you tolerate a post coming out of his head? So let's relive this for a second. He's got the police department behind him, and he's approaching a decision. He's thinking about it. He's dwelling on it. Look at his body language, his eyes, things are getting darker. And at this point, what do you want me to do? Which way do you want me to go? Left or right, or in or out of the police department? So he chooses to leave. And as if I may be generous, he and Harrelson share a very tender parting. McConaughey is at a split point between the window to the police department and the door, which is his exit. Harrelson is tucked neatly within that frame, and he is not leaving the police department. This is the movie The Greatest, which we'll be talking about in a few more frames as well. A son has died, and one of the other sons became pretty out of control. He's now handcuffed to a hospital bed, and his mother's talking to him. All lines in this frame converge on him. There's a corner of the room. The tiles all lead up to him. He is the issue right now. This is from Schindler's List, and this is a lineup of a lot of Jews who have to check in. Notice that there's a gap between them. And this brings us to the awkward question of people how random it could be who lived and who died. There's no real difference between the people on the left and the people on the right, but a lot of people are not going to make it. In the King's Speech, we follow the King of England. This is the stuttering king, and he's meeting his speech therapist. Let's look back. This is a king, and look at the quality of the wall. This is just a shambles. This is the Crown Prince of England, and this is an Australian speech therapist. They are on opposite sides of their respective frames because there is a huge gap between. We don't know this in America because we don't actually have royalty. We don't appreciate the importance of royalty, but it's a big deal to the English. Even in this frame, they're on opposite ends of the frame. And it's, you can't tell here, but ultimately these two guys, this is a true story. These two guys will be best friends for the rest of their lives. In The Sixth Sense, we see a man at Bruce Willis's house. And if you look closely, there's a patch of white in his hair, which is going to be important. And then this is the little boy, Colt Sears, who will be the center of the story for the balance of the film. And when he turns around, we also see a patch of white in his hair. Is this coincidence? Now, this is a cut and paste from the actual script. And I took the liberty of highlighting the introduction of both Colt Sears and the stranger. The stranger has a patch of white in his hair. Colt Sears, his hair is dark with a small patch of jet white on the side. So what does that mean? It means that, and I hate to ruin the movie for you, but you've all seen it. Bruce Willis failed the man on the left, and he has a chance to redeem him. So they have the same problem as Colt. These two figures have the same problem, but Bruce Willis can redeem himself by helping out Colt Sears on the right. Color coding. In the movie The Little Buddha, we meet a boy who lives in Seattle, and all his scenes are very blue. We also meet Siddhartha, who lives in India, or the history of, and he's always very red. His father, the boy's father, everything in Seattle's blue, and whenever they cut to the memory of Siddhartha, it's red. But when they're actually in India, this is normal daylight. Here's the story. This boy, it is presumed, is the reincarnation of Siddhartha. And these monks have approached his father and said, we believe that he should rule Tibet, and we'd like to take him with us to our land. And he's trying to explain to his father that, you don't get it, but, we sincerely believe that he's the reincarnation of our leader. Now look at the father on the right. His face is all blue. And look at the distance between them because they are so far apart. But also look at the father. There is a rainbow of colors all around his head. There's all these possibilities that are just beyond his mental reach of what's going on or what is possible. And again, they're so far apart from each other. It's like the King's Speech. There's such a chasm between these people in their thinking and in their place in the world. Now, the father comes back to Seattle and he's trying to explain this to his wife, and she's resistant. And he's saying, "What if?" And she's like, "No, no, our son is in second grade. He should be a little boy." There's a light cast on his face. He has seen the light. She remains in the dark. Blue. Blue is a very common color. You can buy blue paint easily. Now, in antiquity, when they made paints, they would buy dyes, mix it with oil from fish, or mix it with water. You had to mix your paints yourself. Today, blue comes in huge varieties and it's not hard to find. But in antiquity, when you made blue, you found that blue was the most expensive of all of the dyes for making up a color. It was so expensive that it was only used for the most important things. And in Christian iconography, it was used generously for the Mother Mary because she's really saint number one in uh, in the Christian faith. So she's often portrayed with a generous amount of blue. She's also perpetually mourning the loss of Jesus. So there's a little bit of the death of Jesus seen in her eyes. In the movie What Dreams May Come, Robin Williams has married the love of his life. They had three children who all die horribly in a traffic accident going to school. And in this scene, they're at their graveside. Notice that there's a dusting of blue only where they're standing, that the trees facing them are blue only on that side, and all the flowers anywhere are blue. The mother is just grief stricken. She's wearing a blue scarf. How this is the woman who had all that joie de vivre, all that joy of life, and now she's lost three children. How many children has she lost? Three. How many shades of blue are there in her scarf? Three. In the movie Always, we're following these gonzo pilots who put out forest fires. Um, Richard Dreyfuss is in love with Holly Hunter, and their romantic scenes are very warm. He gets up to get a drink from the refrigerator, and he goes blue. She is, she sees, reads such fear. She looks at him and she sees death. And she asks him not to fly tomorrow. And he's like, "What for?" So the next day he flies, everything goes wrong, and his death is assured. At the end of the movie, some firefighters are trapped on the ground, and she decides to steal a plane and rescue them. As she flies, we see her in all the dials, and she's gone blue. The plane is in trouble. As the plane flies across the sky, we see the plane is blue, and we know this plane's not coming back. His ghost talks her through putting the plane down in a body of water, and she's able to survive. And slowly, the light between them is going out, and it's over. He's done. He's walked the earth, and he's saved her. And his time on earth, he is over. Green, green as sick. In the movie The Cooler, we follow William H. Macy. He is the textbook loser. He is such a loser that he makes a living in a casino. Whenever a casino table's losing money, he's told to go there. He touches it, and instantly all the luck drains out of the table. His kitchen is green. His shirt is green. His door is green. His curtains are green. His plants are dead. They used to be green. His sheets are green. His pillowcases are green. Notice that his dashboard is green and easy, and he's pulled up to a place called the Easy Mark, meaning that's how you spot the loser you're going to pick on. Even his eyes are green. And we know that William H. Macy really has steel gray eyes. Now, but his girlfriend has a green corsage. She's green as life. In the movie The Greatest, we meet a boy who's a senior in high school. It's really the end of his senior year. He's got a green bag, so what? He dies in a car accident with the girl that he's in love with, and she's hurt. Hurt, and she's also got a green scarf at the funeral. She arrives a month later wearing a green sweater to explain that she's now pregnant and to explain to the parents that she's carrying their grandchild. The mother doesn't accept this, but she's lighting a green candle with a green bar of soap, you know, lighting a candle for her son while she's taking a bath. At the beach, a green child's bucket washes up to the feet of the father. At the beach, the mother has a green purse, which is like such a green. I don't think anyone would actually carry that green. She drops on the surface, picture falls out, waves wash it away. She scrambles to recover it. At a baby shower, the father, who's a mathematician, everyone's writing their good wishes on her stomach with a Sharpie. He writes a formula. Sorry, I can't tell you what that means. Now, the mother sees that the house cleaner has washed a shirt that belonged to the boy. It's green, and she's mad. Don't wash that because he didn't even wear it. At a kind of reception to cheer up one of the brothers, all the balloons are green. As his daughter is trying to escape his now crazed family, she tries to escape with green books and a green coat to get away from them. Green as evil. In the movie John Wick, he is a highly capable killer, and all these people want him dead. You can see they're portrayed in green. Evil is dangers all around him. It takes many forms. In this picture, almost everyone's green, but the guy at the head of the table who is not green is the one person who's going to stand by and be his ally. Even William Dafoe, who is a split decision, is half green and half daylight. In the cooler, this person has evil plans, and there's a discrete green light behind his head. In the back of his head, he's got an evil plan. In House of Cards, we meet Petrov, president of Russia, and he has challenged Francis Underwood to meet him in a bunker in Syria. Now, he's wearing army garb, but it is a virulent, vibrant green, not camouflage. Technically, it is camouflage, but he really lights up. He fills up the whole frame. He's dead center and reaches from the top to the bottom. And there's Francis Underwood meeting him. And Petrov is leading him into an evil plan. As he does, Petrov becomes progressively more and more of a monster. The human color goes out of him. His eyes are blue. He's sick. His lips are kind of a sick blue. And the color of his uniform becomes more and more evil green. And ultimately, when he wins over Francis Underwood also becomes green. And when he succeeds in that, the color returns to Petrov's face. He's done his evil deed. So there's Petrov, the public face, and Petrov, the monster. Purple. 2,500 years ago, the king of Persia was Perseus, and he loved the color purple. He thought it was the most beautiful color, and he wore it all the time. He made purple the color of royalty. So we traditionally think of this, when you look at that crown, we think of this as a typical color of royalty. In Unbreakable, which is an M. Night Shyamalan film, a child is born to a woman. Woman gives birth in the back of a mall, and the child, she's wearing purple, and there's a little bit of lavender around the blanket that she's holding the child. And the child is crying all the time. It is determined that the child's bones are all broken. The child has a genetic condition that makes his bones very breakable. Everybody calls him Mr. Glass. To get him out of the house, the mother puts a present out there in the playground. He can only get the present by going out of the house and going to the playground. It's wrapped in purple wrapping paper. He unwraps it. There's purple tissue paper, and in it is a lavender comic book about superheroes. He grows up to be a maniacal person who believes in superheroes. He always wears purple as his trademark. He believes he has authority over others. He believes he speaks with the voice of the ancients, and he stages all sorts of horrible things where people die looking for a superhero. In this case, he's having a conversation with a man at a bar and finds out that there's a very vulnerable apartment building which he burns. In this case, he's caused a commercial flight to crash. What a monochromatic frame, but he's still dressed in purple, red. This is back to the movie Submarine, which takes place at a school in Wales. All the children are in uniform. Suddenly, a girl runs into the scene dressed totally in red, and we see her. We can't miss her. Even in a crowd, we know she's there because we can find her red. And when she's not wearing a red coat, she's got a red corsage. We always know where she is. Like the green corsage of Macy's girlfriend bringing new life to his life. This red corsage is a passionate element brought to, when we finally meet her, it's no surprise that she is the romantic interest for the rest of the film. In the movie Schindler's List, almost entirely in black and white, it takes place in Poland, and we see this huge exodus of Jews. We know historically they're going off to their deaths, and we're following the life, the career path of Oskar Schindler, a businessman who's watching all of this. Suddenly he sees something, and we see something, a girl with it's the only color in the whole film. We see a girl in red coming along, and she's being escorted by the Nazis, an innocent little girl being escorted by the Nazis, presumably off to her death. And she's able to escape and run countercurrent to the lineup of all the Nazis. She slips into an abandoned house, climbs under a bed, and interestingly enough, as soon as she's out of sight, her coat stops being red. So then the movie progresses through all of that nightmare of the Holocaust. At the end of the movie, Oskar Schindler is looking at the fruit of what the Holocaust meant. He can't even smell it. It smells so bad. And he sees something. He sees bodies being brought on a cart, and he recognizes that little girl. Stalin once said that one death is a tragedy, 1,000 deaths is a statistic. When we think of one death, we're horrified. But when we think of 1,000 deaths, we can escape ourselves through the sheer number of it. By having this one girl in red, she becomes a person that we can identify with. And he's horrified by what he sees. What could be more innocent than this little, guileless child? In the movie Sixth Sense, Cole Sears runs up to a church with a red door. When he's walking out, he steals, there's little figure with Christian figurines, he steals the red one. His mother's going to change the side because it has a stand. She steps out of the room. When she comes back, all the drawers are open, and we see items in red throughout this kitchen. There's a red doorknob, and Bruce Willis is always locked out of the cellar. The boy has built a tent for himself out of red. Every time Bruce Willis talks to his wife, she's got a red shawl on. When he comes to her, when he's late for his anniversary dinner, she's in red. And he's talking to her again, and she's again got a red shawl on. Now, at one point, Bruce Willis, who is a psychiatrist to Cole Sears, are going to go and attend the funeral. A girl has died, and at the funeral, they see the mother, and she is dressed totally in red. And they discover that the mother poisoned the daughter. So this mother's got, this is a woman who's just buried a daughter, and she's not dressed in, in a traditional black, but she's in red. So we see her, red flowers right behind her, red lipstick. She's the culprit. In this scene, Cole Sears is explaining to his mother that he sees ghosts, and she doesn't believe him until he proves to her by saying what his grandmother, her mother, said to him. and she realizes that this is a secret between her and her mother. So I'm going to stop share at this point. So these are all useful tools. I hope that was of some interest to you. We'll be talking about, in our next session, we'll be talking about art. And I'd like you to think about the use of symbols and framing. You know, when you go first, you get to make the rules, you get to make the mistakes. And the photo artists of the early 19th century kind of went first and made the mistakes. They were also influenced by the artistry of previous centuries, but they were also cutting a path. Until next time, take care.